All right, y'all, welcome back. So bear with me because I am putting together, what will be the first course offered on this platform as an introduction to clinical herbal medicine, and ethnobotany. And I will be starting that today. So bear with me. But I did want to go ahead and delve into Medical Apartheid by Harriet Washington because in a previous video I spoke about, the reality that bodies are stolen, and there's a whole market and industry really for that, from funeral homes, from graveyards, and donated to universities and God knows where else for scientific medical discovery. And a lot of these, quotes and what have you come out of the 1800s. We do see, certain instances in the late 1900s. And, when you get to the end of this chapter, she admits that it's something that still goes on today. And so this is chapter 5. I do want to read through just some of this. And you can find a lot of her interviews and discussions, maybe even lectures on YouTube. Harriet Washington. I think she was a bioethicist, I believe, or something along the lines, which again is one of, my minors. Which is going to have to change, when I transfer. But thankfully I have the textbooks, and honestly it'll still be a field of study for me because I'm gravely interested. All right, the Restless Dead. Anatomical dissection and display. In Baltimore, the bodies of colored people exclusively are taken for dissection because the whites do not like it and the colored people cannot resist. And, we have to put a lot of things in context, especially because of the danger nowadays of saying colored, with our people included, of even saying black and brown, which I know I've mentioned in other videos, but did specify brown being our complexion and hue, and variations of that, black being the sort of social political construction of race within this country. Still referring to black individuals, foundational black Americans. And also, at the end of the day, regardless of what's going on politically, there still needs to be true mention of the reality that other melanated people also have been subject to a lot of these evils, right? So I don't want to take away from that. But I also don't want it to seem as though I'm saying it to denote some type of solidarity, because unfortunately, as we are learning more and more, that has never truly been the case. And when you look into resources like LULAC, check out that website when it comes to Latin Americans, Mexican Americans. Many of them are categorized as white within this nation, align themselves with whiteness, and have very racist views toward black individuals, toward foundational black Americans. And like I mentioned early on in a lot of those videos, even witnessing and being subject to that in my own courses in university with a Mexican professor, a lot of them are changing the narrative of what happened, of their role in the slave trade and slavery in this country in the Americas, and reframing things in a way that is intellectually dishonest. So just wanted to put that out there. But yeah, let's continue on. More than likely, this is referring to foundational black Americans. All right. No place in the United States offers as great, and some Africans as well, offers as great opportunities for the acquisition of anatomical knowledge, subjects being obtained from among the colored population in sufficient numbers for every purpose, and proper dissection carried on without offending any individuals in our community. And when I did my anatomy lab, which was a lecture and cadaver lab, those bodies, I think there were about 5 of them in the room, they skinned them, which is it's a weird thing to say, so that you can see, the fascia, the tissue, the ligaments, all the things, the veins, what have you, arteries, all the things, muscle, all that, right? So you can't tell necessarily the complexion. And then, I guess by the time rigor mortis sets in anyway, the flesh can kind of darken, and then they usually cover it up so that you're kind of only seeing the portion that's being studied from like table to table. And so when I think back, I can't remember any sort of complexion of those particular bodies. And today, we do see more people in the dominant society kind of like donating their bodies to science and things like that. But I still believe disproportionately that the majority of bodies utilized for study are black bodies. Yeah, like I don't believe that they're not, Anyway. Okay. On September 11, 1977, Casper Yagan, a 68-year-old retired auto mechanic, vanished. His sister, Pearlie Smith, with whom he lived, contacted a police officer in the Washington, D.C. missing persons unit and provided the photograph he requested. He said he would be back, but I didn't hear anything, Smith told the Washington Post. So for more than a month, Smith, Yagan's niece, Minnie Champ, and other family members made relentless inquiries of the police at the 5th District Station House. I'm sorry, I kind of stumbled there because I was just thinking, it came to mind. There are inordinate amounts of missing black children. Not just those taken and being lynched, which we know is something that's still happening today. Numerous lynchings in the past 2 years alone. But there are so many reports surfacing because there are more people dedicated to kind of looking into all of this and staying abreast of what's going on. And it really is quite overwhelming and sad, the number of missing black women and men and girls and boys that are happening. And a lot of those bodies coming up, dead, and Lord knows what those bodies will go on to endure even after death. And so, yeah, this is a crisis. It's a silent crisis that is happening right now, but there's so much going on to distract us that no one is really speaking, not too many people are really speaking up about it and saying anything. And while this is happening, we have the closure of schools, not the closure of prisons, by the way. The new Jim Crow, check that out. That is still the way that slavery is able, and the forms that our people have known in the past, to be perpetuated today. And you have the building and opening of state-of-the-art hospitals popping up at my university. They just announced early this year, top of the year, this humongous extension on an already humongous hospital has opened. They got to fill those beds, people. This is big business. What? They got to pay these people they're employing. And all of this desire to be the innovators in this and to be the leads and heads of this and the next big thing scientifically. And research. Yeah, that requires bodies. And the more that people are waking up to some of the disturbing realities of biomedicine, the more people are turning away from that if they're able. And, forgive me, and I need to say this in other posts, I'm in no way discouraging anyone from taking advantage of that system and what it has to offer. You have to consult with your health professional, make the decision that is right for you, pray about it, and just be as informed as you can. That's the point, right? Being able to give informed consent, to make informed decisions. Really important. And unfortunately, a lot of these facilities aren't really looking to inform you of everything that's going on and the things that really matter. Quite literally, in what I've studied in my bioethics course, they're not required to by law. And when you sign that, when you go into these facilities and you agree to these policies, you agree to the fact that it's at their discretion. Physicians have discretion, and there's a such thing as them being allowed, and I forget what it's called, I gotta find it, we just studied this like a few modules ago. They're allowed to omit information, even a diagnosis, if they find something that they feel like you're not in a space to handle being told what they've discovered or what have you. They are allowed, excuse me, to not tell you. They are allowed to not be transparent. And that's what you're consenting to, is you being the passive, the patient, and them ultimately holding your fate in your life in their hands. And all it takes is someone deciding that you aren't mentally capable of making decisions, which is why it's so important to have an advocate with you when you go into these spaces, whether that's a family member or whomever who tends to be well informed. Because I can't imagine, I can, but it's terrifying to think about all of the people, those unhoused, those without support systems, navigating these systems and being at the mercy of these people. And I'm not to say, it's not to say that they're all bad, but the way that the system is set up, even if you are good and have the best intentions, at the end of the day, you're subject to your employer's policies and to the legal ramifications that govern these interactions and this sort of care, quote unquote. So your hands are tied in a sense as a practitioner. And very few people are willing to buck up against the system and the powers that be because it's their livelihood. People have indebted themselves hundreds of thousands of dollars and spent many years acquiring a sort of entry key or ticket to be able to be practicing in this profession. People aren't going to just give that up because something doesn't sit right with them morally. No, again, we don't do well with cognitive dissonance, with the discomfort of that. So we find ways to cope and to justify and to be okay. Anyway. At the 5th District Station House, they also called area hospital. They also called area hospital emergency departments, which the officers should also have done. Everyone with whom they spoke assured them that Yagan had never been brought into a hospital until Champ called the police again on November 1st, 1977, and reached the officer with whom Smith had first spoken. He visited them again and made several telephone calls, which revealed that his original report had never been properly filed. The police made other errors as well. The officer had never personally checked emergency rooms, and the missing persons unit had not followed procedure by checking Yagan's description against a list of recently deceased, unidentified patients. When police did so, they finally found Yagan's body on a slab in the anatomy laboratory of Howard University Medical School, where he was on the verge of being dissected by students. My goodness. While his family had searched for him and repeatedly called police, he had lain unconscious in the hospital. When he died on November 3rd, his remains were sent to the medical examiner's office through some lottery or something. They decided to award his body to one of the medical schools, and it wound up at Howard. And that's the thing too, when it comes to those who are unhoused, who don't have, much support system, so many people, it's kind of like this unspoken rule that those individuals within our society who tend to live in the underbelly, anything goes for them. The elderly, anything goes for them. And it's horrific. It's horrific. And this is what Dr. Linwood Rayford said, and the school's assistant medical director told the Washington Post. On January 4th, 1978, police used fingerprints to identify Yagan. Rayford's forthright allusion to a misplaced patient and cadaver lottery. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with me right now. Trying to read this. Cadaver lottery is troubling enough, but Champ nursed an even darker view of the affair. She told the Post her uncle had been found up in the lab, and they were making experiments. We were not making any, quote, experiments, Dr. Rayford dryly demurred. Champ found it difficult to believe the hospital had made good faith errors, but it did not help that the hospital, which insisted Yagan had died of natural causes, was unable to tell his family from what illness he had suffered. Also, Yagan's pockets had contained the name and telephone number of a nephew, yet this man had never been called. Yagan's family was haunted by a plethora of unanswered questions. From what disease had Yagan died? Why had hospital personnel failed to report his presence or to contact his nephew? They took their quest for answers and justice to the court, suing the D.C. city government and Howard University Hospital for negligence. Judge Nicholas Nunzio dismissed the negligence charges against the hospital, but a District of Columbia Superior Court jury decided against the city, awarding the family $53,000 and some answers. What the world? This is a slap in the face. The ruling against the city in the award, but there are, there's a price on bodies. A cheap one at that. The ruling against the city and the award were reversed on appeal, but the answers revealed to Yagan's family how he came to end up in the anatomy laboratory. On September 11th, the police had taken an inebriated Yagan to an intoxication center. The paper in his wallet with his nephew's name and address was ignored and placed with Yagan's possessions and storage at the center. When he grew ill the next day, Yagan was taken to Howard University Hospital without these items and admitted as a John Doe. Over the next months, hospital staffers repeatedly told Yagan's sisters that no one of his description had been admitted, even though he was the only unidentified patient in the hospital during this period. Shame on them. And that's the thing too, not only do many of these people, much like we see with what's coming out about that police department in Mississippi, what a lot of those people engage in. Same is true for many nurses and doctors in the dominant society, and many of the minorities that seek to align themselves with them and the supremacist system that exists. Not only do these people not care, but because apparently, this is what we're being told, there's a crisis in healthcare where there's not enough personnel to fill the hospitals and to render care, yet we're building more hospitals. Make that make sense? These people are overworked, understaffed. We know and we're hearing from many medical students and first, second year medical professionals in their fields how toxic and horrible the systems are. And these are from people who are privileged and respected because of the color of their skin. So it's an all-around shit show. I'm not gonna curse on here, but you know what I'm saying? So already on top of their racist personal views that many of these people hold, and the ingrained through academia all the way up to licensure and practice, the ingrained, what am I trying to call it? What is that called? This ingrained hatred and belief that black individuals are less than. Like that, those viewpoints, that understanding stains the curriculum. And it's, you know, dressed up in colorful language. And so they're being taught a lot of the viewpoints that they hold, you know. On top of all of that, these people are overworked and exhausted and really are just trying to get home and get through the day, not making an excuse for this ridiculous situation because they still have a job to do. You know, but it's sad. Anyway, even though he was the only unidentified patient in the hospital during this period, when Yakin died, his body was taken to the medical examiner's office, which donated it to Howard University Medical School. Among other things, Yakin's story illustrates a classic discord in interpretation between many African Americans, or many foundational Black Americans, and medical personnel. Intentionally or not, Yakin and his family were certainly abused and exploited. But like many foundational Black Americans, Minnie Champ imputed a darker motive to the hospital than was indicated by the facts. Yeah, please, by the few things that we knew. One factor feeding the friction between Yakin's family and the hospital may have been a confession of the concepts of experimentation, dissection, and autopsy. Human experimentation entails an induced change that is carefully controlled and monitored to reveal medical or scientific information. Dissection, from the Latin verb dissecare, means to cut apart. This procedure is undertaken to identify and examine a body component during, for example, medical education. This is the surgical process that Yakin's body had been on the verge of undergoing. Autopsy and necropsy are the terms used for an investigative dissection by physicians who are attempting to determine the cause and other circumstances of a person's death. The hospital personnel, who in this case happened to be primarily foundational Black American. Wow. Cast the Yakin incident as a regrettable fluke. And you know, I hate to say it. I really do. Actually, no, I don't. So, two of the worst experiences that I've ever had going to the doctor, and I've had many, were by an African woman. I don't know if she was Ghanaian or Nigerian. The worst. A Russian man. And another woman who I believe was mixed, but I don't know with what. I think maybe African and Caucasian. So that's 3, sorry. The worst experience. And when you try to report these people, they can lock your chart to where you don't have access to it. I mean, they can essentially blackmail you. So where you're able at one point to see the notes that they've written, and they can go back in and edit their notes as well to say whatever they wanted to say. So if they mistreat you, verbally, physically, harm you, emotionally, mentally, whatever, and you seek to, within your right, report that, and you could always call like the bioethics committee as well. And then there's, you know, different agencies and things that you can kind of report to and reach out to. But trust me, they will go out of their way to prevent you from smearing their reputation. And it's crazy to read this because, yeah, it was people who were skin folk, except for the Russian man. And women who rendered the most ridiculous, horrible care I have ever experienced. And we see now that there is this surgence, right? Because they're incentivized of more first generation continental Africans, Caribbeans, what have you, coming over. And the level of harm that they perpetuate, proven harm that they perpetuate on our people, on the elderly in these facilities, on the children, especially the elderly, it's so unfortunate, is horrifying. Horrifying. And so in a way, unfortunately, our enemies are not just those in the dominant society. And it's been that way for a very long time. And there's a historical record of that. But being as forgiving as we are, as is in our nature to be, we easily forget and keep pushing. Not realizing that our very lives are at stake when we don't take enough care to look out for our own. And to, you know, a degree, unfortunately, a lot you can't foresee. You know, but it's like, what can we do as a community to better protect ourselves? Because nothing is changing. These things are only worsening. These realities are only worsening. And it's unfortunate. It's horrible. And we are literally deliberately being left out of programs, left out of job opportunities, left out of so many things because we are foundational Black American. At this point, it's not even about race, right? Because there are other melanated individuals who are doing worse harm, more harm, who are deliberately leaving us out. It ain't all just on these folk no more. No. So then you gotta ask, well, what is this about then if it's no longer about race for real? Trust me, it's still about that to some degree. Don't get it twisted. But more than that, it's about ethnic identity at this point. It's about ethnic identity, which is why being able to clearly define who it is that we are, foundational Black American, is so important. So that we can clearly know who's who, what's what, bada bing, bada boom. Because trust me, they know. And Haitians and Caribbeans and what have you. Hispanics and what have you. East Indians and what have you. They know. This system is literally tilted in their favor. They are incentivized to even be here. taking away our tax dollars, our resources, what our ancestors have fought for.